Greetings. Tony from Old River Hardgoods again. Well, the music you're listening to, Blues For Flauros. My third CD, Angels on Fire, and as always, there's a link to the full version, and a video I made of myself performing it several years back, down there in the description. In today's video, we are going to be taking a look at some early leatherworking tools from both the 18th and the 19th century. Some of which are in my personal collection, some of which are ones that I've sold, but got a whole bunch of great and fascinating tools to look at, so let's get on with the show. Well, this is where our story starts. And it all began back in 2002 when I got contacted by a gentleman who was with the Lord Sterling Festival at Basking Ridge, New Jersey. And he'd asked if I'd want to come demonstrate. He asked specifically if I'd do woodworking, but I said I also do a little bit of leatherworking, and leatherworking's a lot lighter to drag around the woodworking tools. So he signed me up, and this picture here is from the first year I was there. And for a number of years that I was there, I did set my tent up there as a lean-to, but that's a lot of work to do without, having help. And eventually I switched over to a diamond fly, which technically isn't in its period correct, but nobody fussed. So anyways, and if you look there on the right, you'll see a beaver pelt in a hoop. Well, I got a funny story about that. A few years after this one, I was set up, and this late 20-something gal comes over and sees it hanging there, and she asked, "What is it?" I said, "It's a beaver pelt." She goes, "Oh, can I touch it?" "Sure." I say. So she goes over, puts her fingers through it, rubs it up and down, and she goes, "Wow." She goes, "Are all beavers this soft?" Well, in the meantime, there's these two old gals standing maybe like 3-4 feet away just watching it going on, and I said, "Some are, and some aren't," with a big smile on my face. Well, the girl said, "Oh," right? Well, the two old gals got the joke, and they started cackling and laughing, and she's going like, "What's going on? What did I say?" I said, "Nothing, don't worry about it." So off she went, and the old gals still kept laughing as they walked away as well. But anyways, moving on to the later years, there's a diamond fly setup. I was there until 2016 was the last year I was there. I may have missed 1 or 2 years. I think that 1 year we got rained out and whatever, but something else had come up. But pretty much I was there for like 14 years on and off. And it was a good time. Great event. Very historically oriented. Lots of kids, lots of families, stuff like that. If you notice the sawhorses, those I picked up at a little antique shop down in Newbury Town, outside of York Haven, back when I lived down there 30 plus years ago. They're hand hewn. There's actually two of them. There's one I got a blanket over that I use for sitting on, but I still got them. They're buried over in the storage unit someplace, and maybe one day I'll dig them out and see if I can work them into another video, because they are kind of neat pieces of work. So anyways, here's my tote, previously made by in S. Look, a nice carving job. Of course, it's got some paint stains and whatever stains and all kinds of junk in here. So, anyways, I'm going to take some tools out and let's take a look. Well, these are the tools that came out of my tote. We'll be taking a closer look at some of them as we go on, but we'll just give you a quick swing through here. Some of the bits and goodies. Some of these aren't real old, but, you know, they're in the style thereof. So, some of these you may have seen before in other videos, but always worth reviewing. So, we're going to start up here at the top and take a look at this compass. This is 18th century. You can tell by the style and the filing. It's got a username on it. And the one tip has been flattened and sharpened to be used for cutting out circles and gaskets. This one does have the original screw on it, pretty much. Truth be told, I did have to clean this one time because it was sitting in the back room for a long time. I used to keep the tote back there and it got a little damp and so, but anyways, now everything's nice and clean. But that's an original. This is a 19th century compass. Just had there to show. It needs a little more cleaning. I didn't do too much with it, but again, original screw on it. A homemade knife, hand forged, whatever. See, somebody soldered the pair of blade to the ferrule there, but definitely a woodsy type knife. And hand forged European style cobbler's hammer. There's a little bit of a mark there, but you can read it. You're doing better than I am because I never have. So it could be German, it could be French, whatever. But yeah, this is one of those pieces I've had like forever. So anyways, now let's take a look at some of the items I've sold over the years. Well, we're going to start off here with some hand-forged punches. You'll see some more of those when we go back and catch up on the rest of the tools out of my box there. And these are, you'll find these time to time. They're not too uncommon, but usually they're pretty beat up by the time you find them. So you find anything that's in half decent shape, you might as well grab it. There's another pair I had. The edges were a little worn, but the bigger one was definitely forged from a file, as you can see from the lower part of the picture there. And of course, we get your pinkers and your scallops. This is a hand-forged scallop. Note the rounded edges on it. And then we got a hand-forged pinker there, made from a file. You know, that's a lot of work, let me tell you. And then the one on the right there is kind of neat because it's got a pinker point, a sharp point in the center, but scallops on the side. Very decorative. Again, made from a file. Both of these wound up with a guy from New Jersey that I knew that collected file tools. I'm not sure if he's still with us. I haven't seen or heard from him in a number of years, so I guess I should reach out and see, but hard to say. So anyways, one more look, and that's at heading knives. These are the early 18th century and prior 17th, 16th century style heading knives or round knives. Now everybody says, oh, they're food choppers. But they're up there in the corner. You see that little picture there? That's one of Mr. Diderot's, if I'm saying that right, Diderot. And he clearly shows us as a tool of the cordwainer. So spare me the discussion unless you do your research, because a lot of people make comments and they don't do their research. It goes without saying, by the way, that any of the pictures you've seen in those slideshow presentations, those are all tools that have been sold and they're not available. And none of these are available as of yet either, so don't even ask. But anyways, picking up where we left off, if you looked in the pictures from the Lord Sterling, you will see me smoking a clay pipe. It was always kind of a favorite. A lot of folks liked it, you know. There's a pretty cool picture the one guy took of me smoking it. Maybe I'll work it in here someplace. That actually was taken by a guy writing an article for one of the Northern New Jersey newspapers, and it actually was the photo they used at the top of the article. And it's actually one of my more popular profile pictures on Facebook, with probably close to 200 plus likes on it. So, just little old me. Here we have elasting pliers. Very early. No name. Very worn, very rusted, very pitted. Which is why I threw it in the box. But, you know, it's an example. We'll be seeing some of those in the sold videos. If you watched my hand vise video, you saw this guy. This is hand forged, although I think it's more contemporary than old, but hard to say. A well-made piece. And how is this used for leatherworking? Well, if you got to repair a harness, section harness is something you need to keep two pieces of leather together. Good piece to have, right? Not necessarily a tool, but beeswax is an essential in doing leather work, especially when you're using hand-spun linen thread like this. And I got a whole bunch of it that got tangled and loose in the box there. I also had some brown wax cord I was using as well, but this is beeswax. I mean, this thing's 20 plus years old. Here we have a very early round knife, like I showed you before. This one's hard to say. It could be 18th century, though. Notice construction, user made. Yeah, it's got some pitting, got some patina, but I think it's pretty neat. I haven't seen another one like it. And finishing up this corner of the goods here, the scissors. This is actually one of the reproduction ones, but it is in the style of the 18th century scissors, and so I use it. So, that being said, let's go back and take a look at a few more tools on the other side. I haven't wet the old whistle with a little bit of Michter's small batch bourbon, as I'm not used to talking like this for extended periods of time anymore. But anyways, another interesting piece I had years ago was this leather stitching clam. This one definitely was early. You see by the hand forged hardware there on the right, and the wooden screw and nut on the top. How the teeth had a slightly notch from being stitched and sewn on, but that was a pretty cool piece. I mean, normally you see stitching clams, they're bent wood. The later ones had bent oak or whatever legs that would just snap together, and use your legs to hold them. Or I've seen some with iron screws and stuff like that. Matter of fact, I have a patented one here someplace. Goes on top of a metal pedestal I should dig out for a video. Oh, we'll see how much interest in this one. Some of these videos haven't been, specialized videos haven't been getting a whole lot of interest, but we will see. But anyways, that was a pretty neat piece. Another wooden item for leatherworking I had years back was this black walnut slitting gauge. Pretty simple design. Had a blade, was forged and just stuck into the arm. A screw that held the top together. The end was just split a little with a saw cut and mortised out. And you adjusted the cut by just loosening the screw, moving it over. Of course, you see it's got some stains and patina in that. And in case you're wondering about the top side, underside blade, all that stuff, years ago on eBay, you get these idiots that they look at the picture like this and they think, oh, he's selling 3 of them. So I had to start doing this for a while. I mean, it was a real pain, but even on Facebook, I still get it. How many of those are you selling? Go away. And while we're on lasting pliers, showed you mine. One on the left, these are bulldog, bullnose, whatever. I think a bulldog. Anyways, ones on the left you can see greatly patinaed, like the ones I have in my box. They might even be the ones that, no, those are sold. So, but yeah, they unfortunately, the real early ones had some character to it. And that one's got a lap joint. A lot of them were through the center joints, like this one on the right. And that one was made by Wynn. William Wynn started making tools in the late 18th century in Birmingham, England. Continued for a long time until they merged with the Timmins Corporation. I think it was 1885, something like that. Became Wynn and Timmins. Yeah, Wynn and Timmins. Timmins and Wynn. One of those. Anyways. This tool actually wound up, I'm pretty sure, over in the Museum of Wind Tools over in England. Jane Reese was putting together, she was accumulating tools through one of senior moments. Anyways, it went over to Jane Reese over in England through Jay Gaynor, who for a long time was the curator of mechanical trades at Williamsburg. I'm sure some of you folks know him. But he was watching my eBay listings for any time I listed a wind tool, and he'd snag it, and I don't know if he'd send it to her or she'd pick it up on her trips over here. But anyways, that's where that one went. So, okay, let's go back to my pile. Okay, picking up over here. Showed you some hand-forged punches I sold. Here's some of them that I kept. Another scallop. This is actually a newer one, but no name on it. Story about this one was, we weren't allowed to sell at the Lord Sterling Festival in New Jersey because we didn't have Jersey sales tax licenses and all that stuff. But you can hand out business cards and that. But I had one clown come over and pick this guy up. Say, is this for sale? I said, no. He said, oh, because I'll give you $15 for it. I said, yeah, back then I could get $65-$70 for it on eBay without even breaking a sweat. Might even still do it. I ain't going to try to worry about it for now. Here we have a pinker, a hand-forged one. This one's actually in pretty good shape. Edge is fairly sharp. Those things, the factory made ones are a pain to sharpen. Ask me how I know that. And here we got a seamer, creaser. This one's looks like possibly lignum vitae. You see these in rosewood. I've seen them in pine, oak, out of every kind of wood. For cobblers or cordwainers trades. I got yelled at by a guy on Facebook because I said call the newer version of these cobbler's pliers. He said they're cordwainers plier. Well, most of the world doesn't know what a cordwainer is anymore. Anyways, these are some slightly newer but 19th century cobbler's tools. Different types of creases. This one's a McGinnis. Yeah, McGinnis. He's a Philadelphia tool maker. A little pit in there. There's a small one. A lot of times you see these handles were charred because these tools were used hot. And they were heated before they were put onto the leather. Moving down to the awls. A twisted shaft awl. That one's got some age, but I don't know how old for sure. This one's definitely early. With the tang on it, or the tang bolster. Might have been made from an old chisel for all I know, but that one's probably one of the oldest ones I have. This one's also got some age. Pewter ferrule on that. Yeah, this one's it. Somebody made a neat handle, probably a newer blade. Newer style one, pretty common. Pegging awl. These usually had short blades, but this is one I actually did a lot of my leatherworking with because it was easier to work with. Blade can be removed and replaced with different ones. And here we got a nice ledger. Didn't see a name on it. Of course, the handle was replaced or whatever, but I forget what there's a specific name for those, but we'll just let that go. So one more thing to look at here, but we're going to go back and finish up with the other tools. This is a neat find, and I'm pretty sure this was 18th century. And this is a Cobbler's or cordwainer's boot peg float. Used for trimming off the pegs, the wooden pegs that you use attached to the soles and the heels to the shoes. Now, I got the picture kind of scrunched up, but this thing was actually about 20, I don't know. I kind of did a guesstimate with my ruler here. Good, probably 20, 22 inches long. And if you notice, it's toothed on the head, and also at the end, that one's toothed. Oh, it gotten rusted and dulled. I suspected that was used for, like, trimming the pegs off right back at the heels, where you couldn't really get in with the float. And again, this is one of those things you get arguments with people on. Oh, that's a tool for floating horses' teeth. Yeah, 22 inches long. Now, I got some experience with horses, so, I mean, it's been a while, but I guarantee it, if I was going to try to run a float over a horse's tooth, sure as heck might be one where it's like almost 2 foot long. I mean, the real horse tooth floats are like maybe 12 inches, at best. But everybody's an expert, right? Moving on. Another 18th century divider that somebody set up as a race tool for actually doing a blind stitching. You can see they forged the one leg out. The other leg was attached. There's a forge weld line there at the bottom where it says tips. But this is used for putting a channel for doing blind stitching. What's a blind stitch? Well, on some pieces of leather work, like horse harness and saddles and that, you want to be able to have your stitching below the surface of the leather so that it doesn't get worn, it doesn't wear and rub and get torn as it's being used. So that's called a blind stitch. There's a lot of CSRs, more than newer ones out there, but that was a pretty neat one. And last over here, and I didn't have a full view of it, was this needle. It was about 12 inches long or so, and I call it a leather lacing needle. Somebody said it could be a needle for stitch and feed bags, which is entirely possible. I'm sure its resume wasn't all inclusive to leatherworking. But anyways, it was hand forged, and again, you don't see that kind of stuff often either. I mean, that's the kind of stuff I look for all the time. All right, well, now we got to go back, look at one more thing over on my pile, and then we are done. So hold on for a second. Well, last up that I used to show were these shoe pegs. Sorry for my hand. These were used to attach the soles and heels for a long time. Now, prevailing, I read some places they went out of fashion in the late 1800s, 1870s, 1880s, but I will tell you, these came out of a 1923 Sears and Roebuck home shoe repair kit. It had leather soles, leather heels, a couple of awls, thread, and a few other things in there as well, but that's where they came from. So, contrary to popular opinion, people were still fixing shoes with leather pegs. And the pouch here, it just had one blast down. That was the problem with these guys. There's one of them little Nicky pouches I sewed up. You can buy them all the time in different places. But hey, I'll take a look real quick at a couple of the projects I did make. I still got floating around in the patch. So hold on. Okay, back. And let me preface this part by saying I am not a great leather worker. Matter of fact, at the time, I was a guy who was sitting down to do this stuff maybe once a year or twice a year, something needed fixing. So, it was just more for show and tell. But there's a pouch I started. Little decorative inlay that I cut out with the pinker. Put a rim on it. A flap for lid. And a piece of commercial brain tan. A little bit of stain on it. Looked great. You can see the stitching there. Not great, not super tight, but You know, I'd just sit there and sew and talk and sew and talk. This is a reproduction of a tobacco, or some folks call them a shot pouch. Be worn over belt or sash. There's a real fancy one that one of my friends, I don't know, it was Tom Condi or one of those guys, made an exact replica of the original. I mean, it's a lot more work than what I put into this one, but just, you know, fringe tied off. And this in itself was, I think this was like a 2-year project, if I remember correctly. And it's pulling out there a little bit. And I was always losing garters, so I stitched up a pair of somewhat primitive garters, but for hold my socks up, for my leggings, keep my leggings tight, depends on what I was wearing. And again, just something to do to pass the time. So, anyways, that's it for this batch, folks. And I hope you learned something. I really do. But most folks don't stay to this part of the video, so it's hard to say. But anyways, time to say goodnight. Well, that's all for this one, folks. Hope you found this little journey through the tools of leatherworking informative. And as always, if you like what you're seeing, please hit that subscribe button to be notified when new videos are posted. Thanks for watching, and bye.